My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine Cristani from Willow Healing Matters, and today I am joined with the lovely Ludovica Colella. She is a cognitive behavioral therapist and confidence coach who specializes in helping women break free from people pleasing, set boundaries without guilt, and reclaim their voice. Ludovica offers one-on-one therapy, online courses, and inspiring content across her platforms. Her work empowers women to rewrite their stories that they've been told about being good and start living in alignment with their true needs and values. So a big welcome to the show, Ludovica, and thank you so much for spending your morning with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what inspired you when I was reading that? I so resonate with everything that you do, but what inspired you to start helping people, especially women, step out of that good girl, nice girl syndrome?
Well, that's interesting because what I do is actually what I lived, what I have experienced in my life, and probably that's what happens to many people. I was basically growing up in my family. I was basically groomed to care. Okay, so my
Mm.
mom unfortunately has been always very ill mentally and physically. So I kind of learned to take care of other people's needs very early on, to be careful to their changes in moods, to sometimes walk around the eggshells in the house and moderate my behavior around other people. So I had to be careful, basically, to the person I was being in that particular moment, in any given time, really. And plus, my father was really young when he had me. He was 24 years old. He was at university, was studying psychology. So when he had me, he had to drop out of university and just go to work, really, because we needed the money. And so he always told me about psychology. Really, it was an everyday conversation. So that, together with the fact that I had the knowledge, I had the books, I had constant conversations about psychology, I think it kind of made me more inclined, I guess, to care for others, to listen, and to be that person who could emotionally support. Now, this is a bit controversial, and it's something that I had to work on in my life, because obviously I trained as a therapist. I love my job. And then I decided to move more into coaching because I realized at some point that I was so wired to connect to people via their pain, if that makes sense. And so I was very empathic. I'm still very empathic, but now I have boundaries. That's the difference. And so before, with lack of boundaries, I guess I got too involved into other people's lives, too involved with their pain. I felt like I had to help them in any way possible. I had to manage their emotions, otherwise I would lose myself. So the relationships with others, which then at some point also became my job, right? Became my way of existing. That was me. I was the person that only existed for others. And so obviously that at some point I realized that wasn't really good for my personal relationships. So I guess that was the main trigger initially. I started realizing that I was attracting people who needed healing. And unfortunately, that didn't really work out in a good way when it comes to having solid, stable, long term relationships, because it was more of an emotional labor that I was doing. And so that basically coincided with my training. And then I went to therapy myself. And I guess I started dismantling some of the beliefs and the patterns that I had. And then I realized that today there are so many women who fortunately are doing the same. So we are not anymore in an era where people don't know what's happening to them and they're still stuck on their stereotypes. We're changing today, and so I guess it's a powerful time to make that shift, even more prominent. And so I want to be part of that change. I guess that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful how you related to a lot of things that happen in our childhood set us up for those behaviors that we still carry on as adults, not realizing
Yeah.
how impactful such a little act when you were younger can carry through and keep allowing you to be the people pleaser or to make sure everyone else is okay. And like you said, forgetting that you're okay, because so often, especially as being a mum myself, you make sure that your child's okay and your partner's okay, but then by the time you sit down for dinner, it's cold. It's
Yeah.
like there needs to be a shift in that mindset, right? It's like, no, actually, I want to eat my dinner warm and I want to, we can all sit down together and eat at once rather than everyone else is okay. Then I think about myself.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And what, as a child, when you find yourself in situations where, well, my parents were divorced, so I was living alone with my mom, and being very ill. Obviously, it was just me and her. So the paternal role that she had, or she, let's say, was supposed to have, her leadership, let's put it that way, was put into had basically didn't have the role that she was supposed to have. So I became the parent at some point. And so this is very
Mm.
common with people pleasing. And sometimes, even when my clients come to the sessions, they don't realize immediately that they have been groomed to care for other people early on because they have been parentified children. And so as a child, you are supposed to be taken care of. People are supposed to think about your needs. People are supposed to teach you about emotion regulation, but that doesn't happen. So there are no boundaries, right? So that's when we start learning that boundaries are, if you set a boundaries, I mean, a child doesn't set a boundary, but if you set a boundary in that case, then you will lose your connection with your parent and your survival depends on your parent. So there is too much cognitive dissonance there and you don't manage to realize what's happening early on. And if no one teaches you how to regulate your emotions, then later on in life, anxiety, feelings of guilt or anger are they all feel the same. They all feel like an emotion, like an overwhelming emotion. And so that's why it's very important for people pleasers not just to set external boundaries, but also to set internal boundaries and realize what's theirs and what's not theirs when it comes to empathy, because they feel a lot, right? People pleasers feel a lot
Mm.
because they're like sponges. And because of what
Yeah.
we just said, they don't have the external boundaries, but they don't have the internal boundaries of knowing what's theirs to carry. So they end up carrying everything, which is very tiring as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and I can fully resonate with your story about parenting the parents because I remember when I was younger, um, I was the one making lunches for everybody at like, I was in like year 1 or 2, so I was like 7 or 8. And I
Oh,
remember making sure that my mum had a coffee because I didn't like being late, but my mum is just one of those people that runs late and that's her thing. But I didn't like being late for school. So I made sure I
sure.
did everything that she could get out the door on time. And it was only like as I went up through life and I'm like, God, why am I trying to fix everything all the time? And I realized even my first marriage, I got into that, that habit of fixing, like I had to fix everything, even if it wasn't mine to fix, and you always run in to be the savior when you don't need to be the savior. And you get stuck in those patterns. And then, like you said, the internal and external boundaries become an issue because you're taking on everyone's stuff like it's your own and treating it that you have to fix it and you have to do something with it when it's actually sometimes just their journey. And sometimes the best thing you can do is
Yeah.
not respond.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I use this concept to reframe helping people because people pleasers also feel like being there for others and helping people, it's their identity. And that becomes problematic because when you identify with a behavior that it's actually a survival strategy, then if it's a lot harder to just stop engaging in that behavior. And
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really important to reframe the idea of helping, because if I fix everything, if I wear the mask of the hero, of the savior, and I want to fix everything and help other people all the time, am I really empowering them, or am I actually
Mm.
disempowering them because I'm doing things for them, so I don't put them in a position of having to deal with their problems, and so that they can improve and they can learn how to do things, right? So that's also, and then also we I learned that in therapy, for example, in therapy training, that's the first thing they teach you. You cannot do the work for the client. It needs to be a 50-50 thing.
Yeah, definitely. And, when you try and step in and do all the work, you just stay in that victim, the carpe diem victim triangle because you're trying to make yourself the savior. And, so often in movies these days, we get told, like, oh, the hero's going to come and save the person, and it's like, actually, no, like that's keeping you in your victim mindset, like you said, because you're helping too much and you're doing all the work for them. Whereas when you step into the empowerment triangle and you're doing that, supporting and challenging, that is truly when a person can create the life that they want and step out of those belief systems that they've been in for so long, because they're suddenly doing all the work themselves, even if you're guiding them and holding that space as their therapist or their healer or whatever it might be. It's still guiding them to find that power in themselves and to rediscover their voice and rediscover who they are at that deeper level.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I meant as well when I said I couldn't just relate to people anymore via their pain body,
Mm,
because that's what
yeah.
happens, right? You get very empathic with these people, you feel their pain, and then what happens when that comes into play? Every emotion comes with an urge, and when it comes to other people's emotions, obviously what can you do if not fixing them, right? It's something still external, so you have to do something, so that puts you into the action mode. So you were on the feeling mode, now you are in the action mode, and you need to make these emotions go away. How do you make them go away if not by helping others, in a way that, though, goes into fixing, trying to fix, trying to
Mm,
change them, trying to do the emotional labor for them, managing them emotionally, which is tricky because then it puts us in a position of becoming that savior, that hero, and the other person stays into their position of victim, of person who
yeah,
suffers. And so then that's
exactly.
codependency, right? That's codependency
Yeah.
essentially. I need you to fix my problems, but also the fixer needs the victim, quote unquote, to feel important. So that's why
Yeah.
it's codependency can be so symbiotic and so entangled and very difficult to immediately recognize, because initially it feels like a good positive relationship, but long term, obviously, lots of problems start showing up. But because these two people aren't just relating via these scripts, they are these scripts. They believe they became these people. Then their identity is completely tied to their behavior, and so that's why it becomes difficult to dismantle.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And it's sometimes it is sometimes if you're stuck in the story and like you said, trying to dismantle it, it can be really difficult because you are living the script 100%, Ludovica, because you can't see any different because you're inside it and you're always in it. So it makes it really hard to see what's going on too, because you're living and embodying it, and it's really hard to always be able to step out of it. And it might just be that little intuition or urge saying something doesn't feel right and I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. And that can be the curiosity then leads to people to finding people like yourself or start to ask questions and see why you do things. Why do I always do that? It just sometimes those compassionate inquiry can be so powerful in changing and finally seeing the patterns that you're stuck in.
Yeah, I love when that happens because it means that the person started developing a relationship with their
Awareness.
intuition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people pleasers are so disconnected by their own intuition. So they're connected to their emotions via the empathy that they feel for others, but they are not connected to their own intuition. So when they have like some sort of awareness coming, like a light bulb moment. They don't always feel like, oh, I should probably listen to this gut feeling. It's more the case of, okay, so I should probably listen to this gut feeling, but then let me revert back to my old behavior. Because that's when, self-trust gets built, when you listen to yourself and you align your actions on based on your gut feeling. If you ignore your gut feeling, if you ignore your intuition, your own emotions, basically you're more easily conditioned. And that is basically the theme also of today's podcast, is conditioning, because essentially people
Mm.
pleasing is conditioning. And every time someone tells me I'm a bit of a people pleaser, I try to reframe that with, you were conditioned to be like that, because no one is born a people pleaser. We become people
No.
pleasers. And the more you
Yeah.
abandon yourself, and that's how it happens basically.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that you're not born a people pleaser, because it's funny, because my husband and I noticed that my son kept coming and asking us what we thought of something. And we're like, this is really weird, because it was stepping into that people pleasing behavior. Like, do you like it? Do you like it? And then we're like, and then the most powerful thing we learned was just asking him, well, what do you think of it? And then he's actually evaluating his own work, and it's kind of stopping that pattern and belief system starting to evolve, because we were like, huh, this is really interesting, and where has this come from? But at the same time, we kind of condition children to have that reward thing, like you get finish
Yeah.
your work at school, you get a sticker, all those sorts of things. And there's no that intrinsic reward. You're always trying to please somebody else.
Yeah, that's very true. And that is a big problem, because obviously children don't challenge adults. Children just see and hear and they absorb. It's
Exactly.
very difficult for a child to just say, that's not right, or that's what I want. I mean, they need to develop a fully solid sense of self in order to do that, but that takes years. So children are dependent on the adult, wherever adult might be. Now, obviously, we're talking about parents, but also when they go to school, they're dependent on the teacher approval, what the teacher says. And so they grow up believing they have to be something to be accepted or to be approved or to be liked. They have to perform
Yeah,
basically, and people pleasing is a sort of performance. So it's very good that you are bringing that back onto them, and telling them,
exactly.
actually making them believe, making them think that's you also matter. It's not just what other people think or believe.
Yeah, exactly. And it circles back to when you initially shared your story about, you were taught to always care for other people, but you forget to check in with yourself too. So I guess if people are listening, Ludovica, and they're curious about how to kind of recognize their own people pleasing behaviors, or almost how they can start maybe taking actions to step out of it. Is there anything that you recommend they start to do?
So, well, if you find yourself saying yes, even when you want to say no, or being extra polite instead of being honest and authentic, if you smile through pain, if you don't want to be a burden to people, if you don't talk about your problems, if you prioritize other people's needs over your own, if you are the person, oh, that's a big one. If you're the person who says, wherever it's fine, I'm the flexible one, I can adapt myself. Maybe there is a little bit of people pleasing, because that's also something else. People pleasers are adaptable, because that's the fawn response. You are meant to be adaptable in that moment, because when you feel like your safety is threatened, and if your safety depends on not disappointing other people, then you will shrink yourself in order to maintain the relationship. So if you find yourself at any point shrinking yourself in order to maintain a relationship, that's people pleasing. That's happening. And
Mm,
obviously, we want to also pass the message that it's fine to compromise in relationships. Okay, so it's compromising is not shrinking. It's very different. It depends on really how you communicate. And we talk so much about setting boundaries, when it comes to people pleasing. But the reality is that when people pleasers are interacting and they're maybe aware of their pattern, but they don't know how to change it, they feel like it's their default way of being. So when they find themselves, like, let's say, in a high stakes situation, like the people pleasing mask just comes on, like they can't do anything. It's a reflex. So it can feel quite discouraging for someone to know that they are a people pleaser, but not to know how to change it. So obviously there are certain relationships in our lives that do feel safe. Other relationships do not feel safe. And usually these relationships that do not feel safe are the relationships that will fall out once we start setting boundaries. But the relationships that feel safe will grow stronger. So that's how we can start experimenting with saying no, with listening to our needs, and maybe putting our needs first as well. That's when we can experiment with voicing our opinions and preference without fearing necessarily the risk of a conflict or a disagreement, with relationships that feel safe. And obviously you will do that step by step. You're not going to start from one day to another just becoming another person. That's not possible. That's not even expected. And it's not going to help you sustain the change in the long term. So start small, start with low stakes situations and relationships that feel safe.
Yeah, that's such beautiful advice, because sometimes when we take the micro risk, it just helps build our courage and our confidence to start to reclaim more and more of ourselves. And through that, then you almost learn to trust your intuition again and build that self-trust like you were talking about. And then once you get more confident, then you do the big leaps of faith. You do like leave relationships, and sometimes you just feel the energy shift and you know it's no longer meant for you anymore. And when you
Yeah.
get really clear on what your boundaries are, sometimes you don't even have to do anything and the people will fall out of your life anyway because they don't
Yeah.
like or they don't understand the new you.
Yeah, well, sometimes people need an adjustment period. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It's also, it's also normal to be a bit taken back when you see someone changing and like you don't know what's
Mm,
going on and you need time to assess. Because that can also be triggering for people. People also have a fear of abandonment, so you could be the trigger in that case. But that is all part of the healing, and that ties into what we were saying. You cannot manage other people's emotions, other people's problems. You have to sometimes be a trigger for others so other people can work on themselves. Otherwise, everything stays stagnant and static, and you cannot be yourself, and they cannot work on themselves. So that's it, right? So there's no evolution in the relationship.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's such a I love that point too, because sometimes you do need to trigger other people. And it's
yeah,
funny because my coach said if we were better friends to each other we wouldn't need coaches, because you would be supporting and challenging other people and
yeah.
causing them to grow. And but that's why we hold these spaces for people to come to so they can express themselves and help them talk through what's happening and start to shift on that greater energetic level and learning, oh, okay, this is who I am when I'm not putting that people pleaser mask on.
Yeah, it's important for people pleasers to start experimenting themselves outside this mask, because it is a social mask, and most times we realize that there is a disconnection.
Mm,
Initially, we might ignore the disconnection, then when we may be in denial about the disconnection, but when we start realizing really it's something you can't unsee. So you will be at some point led to change, especially nowadays there's so much information out there, and you can really do so much even just with a googling session, and you can learn about people pleasing and how what it is and how to change it. There are so many people out there really, that you can find support with, but it's important also to understand that the world needs to be gradual, and people pleasers sometimes are also perfectionists. So I don't want people to believe that they have to change completely their lives in order to heal, because that's not it. They can start small, and they can maybe start by recognizing some of their main rules. Some rules
mm,
are like, I need to be liked all the time, and therefore I need to avoid disagreements. Or I need to put people first all the time. I need to make people happy all the time. And if I disappoint people, then I lose love and connection. So these are usually the main ones.
Yeah. So I'm just having these moments flashbacks in my life before I realized that was what I was doing, because I resonate with some of those so much, because you're like, oh, hang on, relating to that story of being the fixer, you're like, oh, hang on, what about me in this equation? Like where have I
Yeah.
actually factored myself in? And as we start to finish our time together, Ludovica, if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
Well, since we are talking about conditioning, I feel very strongly about this patriarchal system that we live in. And why I mention this, because obviously, I talk about the good girl syndrome, and I don't want to pass the message that it's only women people pleasing, because it's also men people pleasing. But for some reason, there is the idea that women are more wired towards caring for others. And there are some theories out there that affirm that. That's not necessarily true, completely true, because that would also mean that men are not wired to care. And I have a problem with that narrative. So I don't want to put that out
Yeah.
there. But also, that comes from the idea that women just produce more oxytocin hormone, so they are wired to care, to be empathic, to bond more easily. But also then it's society that shapes us, it's family that shapes us. So these kind of stereotypical roles are then reinforced or discouraged by society. Like men cannot show emotions, women can and should also manage their emotions and other people's emotions. So then you end up being basically you end up in these two different categories, and the
Yeah.
essentially are social masks. So that's what they are.
Yeah.
So if I could heal one problem, would be gender differences and patriarchy. Actually, that's two problems, but you know what I mean, like they link.
Well, I guess it would be summarized as equality. Like everyone has their own roles, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, it would be just being seen as, yeah, everyone has emotions, and yes, we might be more, that caretaker role, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that's the default role either. So it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's a predisposition, and it's also a role that has been taken up out of necessity because in the centuries and in the if we go back in time. But it's not biological destiny. You don't have to take care of other
yeah,
people's emotions. And we are talking here about parenting, which is a specific situation. But when it comes to people pleasing, it's not just parenting the issue. If that was only
yeah,
parenting, that would be a total different problem. But it's not. It's not
exactly.
parenting. It's everything. So people pleasers please other people, although they attempt, let's say, to please other people to maintain love in their lives. And that's a behavior that is not out of authenticity, it's out of fear. So the question then
Mm.
is, if I wasn't afraid of losing this person, what would I say? How would I be? What would I do? 'Cause that's the question that can maybe start sparking some reflections or triggering some shift.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just like sometimes, you'll have one statement said to you and it can be enough to turn your whole world upside down because it triggers you and just hits that point. But you need to hear it too. So, being curious about it can be really powerful. And where can people find you if they want to come work with you, Ludovica, or if they want to know more about what you do?
So I have a website, and there's also an interesting blog there about people pleasing. So if people want to get some more info, familiarize themselves with the topic, they can go on my website, which is lu dash coles. So that's cole.com. And then I'm also quite active on my Instagram. That's Ludovica, my name, underscore Colella, my surname, underscore coaching.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to include those in the show notes as well so everyone knows where to
Thank
find
you.
you. So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for sharing your journey and just some ways that you can start to ask those questions to step more into your power so that you can step out of that role that you might not even believe that you're in. But if this is triggering things for you, then I'd start asking more questions as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Catherine. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.